Hello everyone. Today I will be trying to replicate this piece of concept art originally made by Eyvind Earle for Disney's Sleeping Beauty. This is one of the pieces that we did in my last 6-week gouache course that just finished. So here's some of my students' work. This one was done by Melissa. I love the little face. It's so well done. This one was done by Jenny. And I like the fact that she left out the features and used this really cool bright yellow, and her textures are awesome. And this one done by Matthew, I really adore how stylized it is and how Maleficent is both adorable and scary. These are the colors that we're going to be using plus white. You can see I've got a cool red, warm red, yellow, cool blue, warm blue. I've got my flathead brush, a couple of roundhead brushes, and I have my white Liquitex. So this is a full-bodied medium or acrylic medium, very similar to the acrylic gouache, but it's slightly cheaper. And you go through so much white paint when you use gouache. So yeah, I get the Liquitex for cost reasons. I'm mixing up the pink for the floor. It's sort of this bubblegum pink, but you'll notice I put a little bit of black in there. And when we're doing Eyvind pieces, almost every single color has a little bit of gray in it. So he worked in a very tonal, with very tonal palettes. So when we say tonal, we mean gray being added to the hue. So this floor color looks pretty good. I did a little test swatch, as you can see up in the corner there. I always recommend doing test swatches because gouache will dry darker than you think. And so yeah, swatches are important. I usually only need to do one or two because I've been mixing paint for so long. So if you're just starting off, do a whole bunch of swatches until it feels right. Adding a little bit of color at a time is also a smart way to, to get to the right color without wasting too much paint. And here you can see I added a little bit more black to that pink, and I'm just mixing up the shadow color and realizing I need a little bit more black. So again, just adding a small amount at a time will save you so much paint. I do find that students go through a lot of paint because they're starting with a lot and then overdoing it when it comes to mixing. So just very gently mix in your black, especially black, right? Because it's so potent. But this looks about right. I was, you can see me there trying to get the right angle for this shadow. And now we're going to mix up the color for the shadows of the rocks. So this almost the same color as the floor shadow. These just have a little bit less pink in them. So doing the shadows first feels kind of counterintuitive because you're like, well, where are the objects going to go that are casting the shadows? They go on top, right? So you have the shadow underneath. It is actually easier this way than painting the rocks and then trying to paint the shadow around the rock underneath and then across. So this is always how I do my shadows. But if it makes you a little uncomfy, wait till the end. Wait till you've got the rocks in and, in this case, Aurora's sleeping body, and then put the shadows in after. But I do like to start with the shadows first. Okay, now I've got my warm blue, or wait, was that a warm blue? No, that looks like cyan. I've got my cool blue, cyan. I've got some yellow, and I have some black. So I'm mixing up the tone first, but you can see I'm adding a bit of pink, and that's because pink is the complementary color, or red is the complementary color to this cyan blue. And so by putting a little bit of the complementary color in, we're actually desaturating our hue without making it too dull. So adding gray to it will also desaturate it, but it gives a more sort of dull effect, which sometimes you want. In this case, I had the pink mixed up, so I thought I might as well throw it in there for a bit of desaturation and mixing up what I would call a blue leaning viridian. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but I can see right here I needed more yellow. It's not green enough, but it's close enough, but I can see I could have done better, could have been closer. Using my big brush here, just quickly mixing up a little bit more because I had run out of paint. So you can see that I get real quick with this. After mixing so many colors for so long, you do gain confidence. It does take practice, but eventually the confidence is there and you know exactly what your recipe is for the color you need. And again, this took a long time. This is practice. When I first started mixing gouache, mixing paint in general, to get the color I wanted would take a long time. It could take, like 15, 20 minutes just playing around with, the recipe. And now I'm pretty confident. So again, this could have been a little more green. but it's in the right family. It's a cool, it's like a cool greeny blue, darker in value. You know, it has a black added into there, a little bit of white, which gives it that tonal feel, you know, that desaturation. And there we go. Quickly painting in that background and not worrying about it being, you know, having ridges. You don't want to smooth out gouache too much as you're painting because it starts to dry and it gets sticky and it can be a mess. So just trust the process. You can always do a second coat that can be smoother. All right, now we're mixing up the area of the wall that is in the light. So the reason I chose this piece, and I'll just quickly say, you can see I'm using the exact same colors as I used for the main wall color, but this time I've added a lot of white to create a higher value of that same hue. So this is perfect for the part of the wall that's in the light. And yeah, so what I was saying is I picked this piece for my course because it really shows how you can create a sense of light and shadow through the use of color and value and contrast. And so every piece that I pick for the course, I choose it not only because I love, you know, these pieces of concept art by Eyvind Earle and Blair. I pretty much love everything they did, but I'll pick ones in particular that help students understand things like composition, color mixing, color theory, or in this case, light and shadow. And if you're interested in the courses, I'm just announcing my next 2 courses, which start at the end of January. And there's 2 different days and times to choose from. So you can check that out in the link in the description. But yeah, back to the painting here, just getting in that lighter area. And the angle is pretty good, but you can see I made a little mistake in the window there, and that's okay. I'll just paint right over that with the orangey color in a little bit. But for now, we're mixing up the pink that is representing the light outside of the castle. So it's this sort of peachy pink color. We've got our white, of course. We're putting in a little bit of the warm red, and then a little bit of the cool red, which is the magenta. Oh, I thought there was yellow, but there isn't. So no yellow in this. This isn't the peachy part. We do add yellow when we get to the more orange part of the window. I actually painted this, I guess it was like a couple weeks ago that I did this one. And the students that were in my course that just ended, they get the full videos of these. So they get like the full time, nothing sped up, and I'm talking over what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So that's like a little extra that you get if you take the course. But yeah, so I'm like trying to remember which step I'm on because it was a couple weeks ago. But now I am mixing up the orange. So again, using the same cool red, warm red, white, and now adding in a little bit of yellow. And then again, just a tiny bit of black to create a more desaturated hue. And it's interesting, the reason why, or one of the reasons why all these colors are desaturated is because Eyvind Earle was using, ancient medieval tapestries and illuminated texts as his inspiration for the overall look of Sleeping Beauty. He was in charge of all the backgrounds. He was in charge of a lot of the concept, the color keys. And, Disney was very adamant about having, one of his favorite concept artists, Eyvind Earle, be in charge of the overall look of the film. He really wanted Sleeping Beauty to be, a breakthrough in animation, something more artful, something more conceptual and visually, stunning, and trying new techniques. And so they did that with Sleeping Beauty. They ran into a lot of problems. It was very difficult to keep up with Eyvind's detailed style. So his backgrounds were extremely detailed, and a lot of the animators were complaining because they're more flat images in the foreground of the characters just couldn't live up to the background. So they ended up actually airbrushing over a bunch of those backgrounds. I just learned that they were using an airbrush for that from one of my viewers. Just so interesting that a lot of the background art had to be changed. It's kind of sad. Okay, so we're adding some water to this black, and I added a bit too much water, but I really wanted to be able to have smooth strokes as I went across the canvas here to create the lines that make up the bricks. So I added more water so that my brush could smoothly stroke across the page, but it was too much water because these stripes are quite transparent, so they're not dark enough. So once I get them laid down, I do another coat with slightly less water mixed into the black. So I guess what I'm saying is you probably should start with a more transparent, watered down version of the black, because you will get those really nice smooth strokes that are slightly curved. I still did them very quickly. I didn't worry about being perfect, because if I did that, then I would slow down. And when I slow down, my line work isn't as confident. It doesn't have the same energy. It can actually end up being more crooked if I go slow. So yeah, speedy with confidence, but having more water in there will allow for smoother, longer strokes. You won't get that dry brush effect. You won't feel your paintbrush sticking as you're painting. And as I darken these lines here, that's a good thing to touch on just quickly, is the idea that you really don't want gouache to feel sticky. Dry brush technique aside, you do want to add enough water that your gouache will feel creamy when you paint with it. It's a very tactile experience. So if it's starting to stick on your canvas, you know you don't have enough water. So adding a little bit of water at a time until it's really smooth and creamy is the way to go. Just doing this, what do we call this again? The spindle, the wool wheel. All the people out there who knit and whatnot are like, what is she talking about? Get it right. But it's a spindle, right? And a wheel, a spindle and a wheel. Anyway, this is the thing that Aurora pricks her finger on and then she's asleep. So this is like a very important element. And I'm going pretty quick here. I could have been a little more intentional with this element, especially considering how important it is for the composition and for the story. You know, it's, yeah, I should have shown it a little more love. I apologize, spindle wheel thing. But yeah, I'm still using my number 6. You'll notice that I use my number 6 almost exclusively, and this is a pretty decent brush that I'm using here. This is an Artist Loft number 6 that I picked up at Michael's. If you have a Michael's in your area, it's a pretty good deal for these brushes, and they work well. They're not the best. I would definitely prefer to use a Winsor Newton, Sable Series 6 brush or Series 7, but they're so expensive and they're very hard to get these days. But yeah, this one works well because look at this. I can press down harder with more pressure and I get this really nice thick line, right? So I can go from thin to thick very easily with a number 6. And I can get, really nice details if I'm careful. And if I roll my brush first before I start painting, I'll get a nice pointy tip. And we all know how much attention I give to the tip. Okay, that was like, yeah. We're going to put some details into the bricks now. So this was fun. I could have shown this a bit more love too. There's a lot of little divots and holes in the wall that I missed. I think overall, when I do these, my overall intention is to go quickly, is to do them with energy and to do them in a way that shows that they're not that hard to approach, that there's a simplicity to it, especially because we're replicating someone else's artwork, right? So it's just the idea is, how did this person paint this piece? Like, what were their steps? What was the process? Did they start with the background? And just sort of like quickly replicating something gives me an idea of how the process went, of what kind of techniques I can use in my own work. And, so a lot of things get lost in that translation, in that quickness. Here we go, dry brush. So I've got a big fluffy brush that I forgot to show at the beginning of the video. And I haven't wet the brush. It's completely dry. Dipped it into my paint, which has very little water in it. And then you could see me on the other piece of paper just sort of getting rid of the excess paint on my palette, right? And then I can go in, and I like to start light and build up this effect, because if I start with a lot of paint on my brush, if I get too wild with it, it might be too much, and then it's really hard to take that away. I'd have to paint over it. And that is a good thing about gouache. You can paint over your mistakes, and if you catch them quickly enough, you can actually wipe them away, which you'll see me do later on when I'm painting the vines. But yes, start slow, building it up. I'm now using my flathead brush just to get a different kind of texture, just to get a slightly different stamp, if you will, or mark. And then moving my brush around, you can see I'm twisting it around. I'm changing the direction of the brush so that I get different sort of stamp marks each time I stamp. So just that variation is really nice. Now, a better way to do this possibly could be using a sponge. I do have a bunch of sponges that for whatever reason, I'm not breaking the sponges out. I should be using them. I think I like to keep it really simple, especially for the courses I teach and the workshops. Is the less materials students need, the better, right? So just so that people know this is very approachable. You don't need a bunch of fancy sponges. But then who am I kidding? Sponges aren't fancy, right? They're cheap. I should be using a sponge. Now I'm using a little brush. You can see how pointy it is. This is a number 2, and this is necessary for these smaller divots. The number 6, I can get some details, but why risk it? Why not, use a smaller brush that I know is going to help me with these smaller little dots and divots. And I'm okay with going to a smaller brush when needed. I should do it more often. Yeah, they would get those in. And then we're going to use the small brush for the vines too. So the vines start off a little bit thicker, like the line is a little bit thicker there. And then as it tapers off, it gets very, very thin. So using this brush is great because I can get those super thin lines at the very ends. You'll often see me kind of move my hand around without actually painting. I'm just sort of figuring out where the next stroke should be, and it becomes this sort of dance that I do with my hand. I notice other painters do it too, or people who are drawing. You kind of move the instrument in your hand around before you apply paint or graphite to the canvas. You're sort of in your mind getting prepared to lay down the mark. So that's what I'm doing if you ever notice me doing that, or if you ever see artists doing that. And the more art you do, the more that happens, the more natural that sort of gesture becomes. I hope that makes sense. Sometimes I just start rambling. I'm not really sure. I know what I'm trying to say. I just don't know if it's coming across. People tell me I'm okay at teaching though, so I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being hard on myself here. Okay, so back to the vine here. I'm not following exactly what is on the original piece. That's why I made this mistake, because I wasn't really paying attention. So I just used a wet, clean brush and I wiped away that paint because it was fresh. It hadn't dried yet. Now, because I'm using acrylic gouache, or as they say in England, gouache, because I'm using acrylic gouache, once it dries, you can't reactivate it. So if you make little mistakes like that, you have to catch it right away. Use a clean brush, wipe it away using a bit of water, and then squeegee off your brush or use another clean brush to soak up any excess water. If it does dry, then you just have to paint right over it. So I would have had to remix the floor color and paint it over it, which would have been a real pain in the ass. So I'm glad that didn't happen. Okay, bringing the vines over on this side. And I guess it's worth saying, if you put your wheel, the spindle thing, and you kind of move it a little bit to the left, or it's a bit too big, or it's a bit too small, then you can kind of change the vines around it to help accommodate what you've done. So I do that a lot. I end up sort of creating my own composition with certain elements, or like putting it in places where it's going to help the composition out, if that makes sense. I also need to apologize because I did this whole painting in 2 sittings. You'll notice that because my nails are different colors from the beginning of the painting to the second part. And I forgot to focus everything, like do the auto or the lock focus. So the focus gets a little funky here at the end of the painting. But hopefully you can still see what I'm doing here. There we go. All right, now we're going to mix up a greeny. What are we doing? Oh, I know what I'm doing. Okay, so I wanted to match the color of the wall so that I could paint around some of the vines and paint behind Maleficent, block in the blue wall color so that the brick lines and the ivy don't get all that it doesn't get confusing, that your eyes can can see the difference between the ivy and the brick lines and Maleficent. So I noticed that Eyvind did this. When I looked carefully at this piece, I could see that he had painted an outline around Maleficent and around some of the vines. So that's what I'm doing here. So I tested out my color. It looks about right. So I'm just going in there and defining, that's what I'm looking for, defining some of those lines. What I did forget to do is show you me mixing the orange, which is the exact same orange as my nails. This orange was made by mixing together yellow, warm red, a little bit of cool red, and a tiny bit of black. So there you go. And I have to do a few coats because some colors, if you work with gouache, you figure this out real quick, is some colors like yellow and white and orange, because you're mixing together those colors, they're very transparent. So you have to usually do 3 coats of those colors to get a nice opaque finish, a true bright color opaque finish. And now we're going to do these little roses. These are, I would say these are kind of a similar color as the floor, a bit more tonal, a little bit more dusty rose. I think I mentioned it in an earlier video, but my girlfriends and I many years ago decided that we wanted to come up with our old lady names, and mine was Dusty Rose. And now it's, I don't know, it feels funny because now I'm in my 50s. So it's kind of like, I'm almost an old lady now. Soon people can just start calling me Dusty Rose. Okay, we're doing the skin color. Let's focus up. The skin color is a little bit of the orange I had mixed together, white. I think I even added a tiny bit of that light blue in there, a little bit of black. And this is, I think we're doing Aurora because the villain, Maleficent, has green skin. So this must be for Aurora, who's laying out, taking a little nap-ski on the floor, which I might do after this voiceover. It's taking it all out of me. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've been so behind on videos here. I really had this, this goal of doing one a week, and then life just got so overwhelming. I moved into a new place, and I was cat sitting for a while, and then I was like teaching more classes than I expected, and just so many things came up. So, but now hopefully in the new year, things are going to slow down a little bit, but I highly doubt it. But anyway, here I am. Here I am. And there I am on the floor sleeping it off. So the original color that I mixed up was too dark. Once it dried, as I mentioned, gouache tends to dry darker. And so I realized, oh, she almost looks as dark as the shadow. She's high, she's really blending into the floor there. So I lightened it up, made it a higher value of the same hue just by adding some white. And then I'm blocking in pretty much her entire body, even though she's covered in a dress. She's wearing a dress. I figured, just paint in as much of the body as I can. It just feels like a natural way of doing it for me, even if that part of the body isn't showing. At least I know the curves, I know the shape, and then can cover it up with a dress. We can make her decent after we paint her whole body in. Her hair was an odd color. Her hair is actually, I was going to say it's similar to mine, but mine's a lot darker, but it's like this sort of cool blonde, it's almost green. And, here you can see it's close, but what do you think it needs? It needs a little bit more white, and it needed a little bit more yellow, but I don't fix it right now. Instead, I put in the shadows. So I bring in some of the shadows, and honestly, I feel like I could have just left it. I think it was close enough, but then I'm like, no, it needs to be a little more yellow. It's looking real sad. It's looking very, too green, too muted. So I added a little bit more yellow there. And now we're mixing up the color for her dress, this is very close to what the walls should have been. The walls should have been more of this, almost like a turquoise, but darker. But this was, the cyan, yellow, white, a little tiny bit of black. And now we're painting right over her body there. Painting her dress on. Poor Aurora laying there as we paint on her dress. This whole scene just seems very sad all of a sudden. I've been watching too many dark movies lately. I'm like, well, actually, that's not true. I watched the Weird Al Yankovic. I want to call it like a mock biopic. It's got the guy in it from Harry Potter. It was really funny. I was surprised. I had some really good laughs. But yeah, I've also been watching a lot of horror movies around Halloween, and I watched The Ring for the first time, the American version. It was scary. It was cool. It was a lot more of like a ghost story than I expected, a lot less gruesome than I expected. Okay, now we're going to mix up the color for Maleficent's dress, her headpiece, that amazing headpiece, the coolest Disney villain, I think. Definitely the coolest Disney villain outfit of all time. The horns in her headpiece are just like, they're killer. They're so cool. They're so dangerous and vicious and sexy. And, and then she turns into the dragon and they turn into the horn. It's just so cool. So here we are using the shape of the brush to get in that nice pointy horn-like shape. In the original piece here, and the way Eyvind would paint her, very different than how the artist who eventually animated or did the animation cells of Maleficent and designed her. She was, a lot more refined, right? So Eyvind, I shouldn't say a lot more refined. She was just different. The way Eyvind did her was more sort of stylized and had sort of these curves and these gestures that you don't see in the movie, but I love the way he paints her in his concept work. So just mixing up the warm blue, some black, a tiny, tiny bit of white to get that first part of her outfit in. But now this part is in the light. So I love this. It's such a great idea, just to show that this part is being lit up. We just add a bit of white to that color. I think I actually added a little bit of white and maybe a tiny bit more of the blue. But then, it gives this effect like she's standing in the light. I also love, I didn't mention it earlier, but that kind of peachy orange outside the window, just giving the sense of like the sunrise, that glow, or the sunset. I can't remember now. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but it's like, doesn't she fall asleep on the day that the sun's like by her 16th birthday, by the sun, the time the sun sets or whatever, or whatever. Brilliant, Erin. Okay, getting in the tendrils here, the end of her cloak, her dress, which is very similar. It's sort of mirroring the shapes of the hair, of Aurora's hair. And also we're getting those shapes in the vines as well, and even in the spindle. So there's just these repeated shapes, which I talk about that in my course as well, about the sort of principles of design and how they're used in compositions and how Eyvind would use them. Okay, we're mixing up not a brighter purple, but a more saturated purple here for the trim of her dress. So we're using the warm blue. We use a little bit of magenta in there, some white and black. And I do mention this in a lot of videos, but if you want a real true purple, like a grimace purple or a Barney purple, you need to mix up a warm blue and a cool red. And you get this real nice purple. And if you want more of like a eggplant purple or like a burgundy-ish purple, then you would use a warm red with a warm blue. Or, you can play around with different reds and blues, but to get a true purple, you need that warm blue and cool red. In general, if you want to get true colors when you're mixing, so when you're making secondary colors, like let's say you want to make a real true green, a bright green, you're going to want to mix together a cool yellow and a cool blue, right? So are they colors that are leaning away from each other or leaning towards each other on the color wheel? I'm asking all of you. Who knows? Write it in the comments below. I'm looking for my color wheel. Let's see. Yeah, it's colors that are leaning towards each other. So yeah, leaning towards each other on the color wheel. Mix those together, you'll get a nice bright secondary color. And now we're mixing up green. So I'm using, we've got the warm blue in there, which I shouldn't have used. I should have used cyan. That's why, look at this green. See, this green is a little bit flat. It's sort of like army toy man, army toy man green. You know what I mean? Whereas it should be more of a true green. So I should have used cyan and yellow and black and white, but instead I used ultramarine blue. So I get this more matte, like, what do you call it? Like mottled blue? I don't know. You don't get the right green is what you don't get. Sorry, it's fuzzy, but bringing in her features, using my little tiny number 2 brush. I'm also shaking the table. My nails look terrible when they're this close up. Erin, stop drawing attention to all your mistakes. I keep getting flack for that. It's like when I cook, I'm always like telling the people I cook for what's wrong with the meal before they taste it, because I always taste it first, and then people are like, "Don't tell us." Anyway, there's her face. She's adorable. I'm all done. Thanks for watching. Time to take the tape off. We made it. All right, go check out Sleeping Beauty, and I'll see you all again soon. Thanks for watching.